This round, each candidate will get 2 questions. You're going to have 2 minutes to answer them. And these questions have been sourced from our viewers in the live feed on Facebook. So thank you for everybody that contributed questions tonight. I hope you're still watching so you can see the answers. So to get started, we are going to start with Mr. Kokesh. And let's see. I don't have a name associated with this one, but for Adam Kokesh, how will you be able to decentralize the federal government? How would Democrats and Republicans cooperate with your vision for a finally free America?
Oh, that's a great question. And ultimately, this is the American people saying, we don't need the Constitution anymore. We are appealing to the higher authority known as the Declaration of Independence, which says we have not only a right, but a duty to alter and abolish systems of government that no longer serve us. And while the Republicans and Democrats of the political parties, the old parties, the 2 wings of the same bird, they are, oh, excuse me, there's a little explosion here in Ashfork. We have some construction working on tannerite, tannerite nearby. So it's a little distracting to hear an explosion in the middle of a debate, excuse me. Living off grid, I love it. So, when people raise this objection, like, you know, well, what if Republicans and Democrats object? Their bases don't object at all, because this idea of localization, getting government down to the community level, means everybody gets what they want. As Larry Sharp says, a libertarian is someone who says you can be as liberal or as conservative as you want, as long as you don't force it on anybody else. This is how we as libertarians, we get to steal the bases out from underneath the old parties by saying, look, if you want this form of government at the community level, that's great. Now you don't have to fight everybody who disagrees with you over the centralized plan of the federal government. This is why we see people from across the political spectrum supporting this message, supporting this campaign, Republicans and Democrats. The only people who can really object to this, and I wonder now if the other candidates fall into this category, are the nationalist militarists, especially hearing Judge Gray with such a strong pro-military message. This is anti-American. The founders were against a standing army. We need to really be the anti-war party, and then we can overthrow the military-industrial complex and the duopoly and serve the voters of those parties who know that they don't want to support the military-industrial complex. If we unite the American people on localization, we can have this revolution.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Kokesh. The next question is going to go to Mr. Hornberger. It's from RKC Cooper. The question is, this year I am expected to receive Social Security benefits. In 2035, the program is expected to cut benefits by 33%. Social Security is a terrible sham for younger workers. Will you support allowing younger people to opt out of Social Security? Mr. Hornberger, 2 minutes.
Oh, I go much further than that. I would repeal Social Security immediately. It is a crooked, corrupt, fraudulent scheme. And conservatives used to understand this. When this socialist program came into existence in the New Deal era, conservatives were strong in opposing this socialism. And that's what it is. It's socialism. It's stealing. We talked about stealing. It's stealing money from one group of people, the younger people, and giving it to another group, the seniors. We're talking about $2 trillion here with Medicare. Why can't you leave this $2 trillion in the hands of young people? Let them handle it. Let them decide what to do with that $2 trillion. Honor their mother and father. Help out the needy. What do we need a middleman for? What do we need the IRS for? What do we need the Social Security Administration for? And remember, these people are not working for free. They may tell us that they're compassionate saints, but they got big salaries they're pulling down. I say get rid of the middleman, leave younger people free to decide what to do with their own money. That strengthens the bonds of families. It strengthens the bonds of society, where charity is on a voluntary basis rather than a forced basis. This is a Ponzi scheme. It's been fraudulent from the very beginning, and the best thing that could ever happen to this country is to restore liberty and private charity to our land.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hornberger. Our next question is going to go to Judge Jim Gray. Carl Krambeck asks, what is Jim Gray's version of UBI?
Oh, well, I'd adopt Milton Friedman's. He called it a negative income tax, but we're compassionate people, not because we have to, but because we would supply money for people. Then get rid of all other welfare. So they would always have an incentive to work. For example, just for numbers illustration, that if somebody makes no money, no one would be taxed at all on their first $30,000 of income. And then if they would get a stipend of $15,000 a year, basically broken into $1,250 monthly payments. Then they would have an incentive because for every dollar they would earn, they would lose 50 cents of their stipend. That is simply putting into effect the logical idea of benefiting from your labors. And also, by the way, it's a serious blight on who we are, I believe, as a country with regard to the homeless issues. Yes, many of them are veterans, many are mentally ill, but if they were to have that money in their accounts, then the private sector would quickly start making fairly inexpensive room and board facilities available, and you could use the private sector to address this on an institutional basis. Right now, our politicians just feel guilty and throw money at the issue and then ride off and do other good deeds. Institutionalizing it, doing away with all other welfare, the food stamps, the bureaucracy, and the rest. Milton Friedman called it a negative income tax. I don't like the word negative, but a stipend would do it. So that would be my address. And by the way, then, with a graduated flat tax, we could turn in our tax returns by a postcard. About a week or two ago, I signed my tax return. I'm modestly intelligent. I don't even understand what it was that I was signing. We need to get rid of the intrusion, the cost, the power, like my comrade said, of the IRS, pare them back to nothing. And we can do that, setting up with Larry Sharp, Mr. Libertarian, in my view, setting up a culture in which people will begin to understand the benefits of what we're talking about. We won't scare them. We'll just bring them into this. They will become fans. We will grow the Libertarian Party and grow the Libertarian ideals. That's what Gray Sharp 2020 stands for. Come join us. You'll see.
All right. Thank you, Judge. The next question is going to be directed to Joe Jorgensen. Bill Marini says, how do you balance protecting religious freedom and the liberty of the LGBT community to live out their pursuit of happiness?
I'm afraid I really don't understand that question, in that the federal government really has no place in deciding religion or deciding who can marry who and so forth. Marriage laws are all at the state and local level. I would like to point out a few things, though, that would to demonstrate to people, because one of my jobs as the presidential nominee is to explain how the private market can do a better job than the government. And my favorite point as far as the LGBTQ community is that the Walt Disney Company, Disney World, offered same-sex marriage benefits in the early 90s, long before the federal government did, or state governments, long before it was regularly done in government. So once again, when a private company has to compete with other companies to get the best possible employees, they start offering things like that. I also like to point out to young people, a lot of people don't realize that if we look at the left, because a lot of times LGBTQ are from the left, that when Barack Obama was running for office the first time, and when Hillary Clinton was, neither one of them were for gay marriage. And when I tell this to young people, first of all, they're pretty shocked. It's like, well, why not? What do you mean they weren't for it? And I explain that, well, because their interest is in votes. That's what they are. They are political animals. They don't care about people's rights. What they want are votes. And in fact, if you look at Dick Cheney, he was totally against gay marriage until his daughter came out as gay. And now all of a sudden he's for gay marriage. Libertarians are different in that we are for everybody's rights, regardless of our own personal situation. We are for individual liberty.
All right, thank you. The next question is going to be directed to Dan Berman. The question from Nick DiTello. Explain your views on Second Amendment rights, and he would like you to address the NFA, the ATF, and unconstitutional red flag laws.
Sure. So all gun laws are unconstitutional. I think that's pretty clear in the Second Amendment. It says shall not be infringed, and fringes are kind of like the little edges of things. I mean, an encroachment would be if you stepped on the thing, but infringement means slowly pulling strings away from the sides of it. We need to repeal the NFA. We need to get rid of the ATF. But hey, if the government needs a source of income, maybe we can turn it into a museum, or maybe it's a convenience store. Yeah, we need to get rid of all these laws, and we need to give America their freedom back. I've been to a lot of countries around the world. I know people in a lot of countries that I haven't been to, and I've seen their fights and their protests. And I've seen unarmed Americans at their protests, and they get sprayed with fire hoses and they get assaulted by the police. But I've seen protests in the United States where Americans go there peacefully and armed, and the police do nothing because they're not ready to start a civil war. That's really what the Second Amendment is about. It's not about starting a war with the United States government. It's about saying we're not even going to go there. We don't need to go there because, a government should be afraid of its people. The people should not be afraid of its government. They work for us.
Thank you, Mr. Berman. Question for Vermin Supreme. This is from Ian Schultz. And he says, Vermin Supreme, do you agree that capitalism and true libertarianism are not compatible?
Not at all. Not at all. I believe that free markets are essential to the economy. I think that's sort of a silly question in a way. The Libertarian Party is certainly very friendly to capitalism and free markets. It's one of the basic understandings of the whole operation, I think. Capitalism has certainly been able to rise as we and has lessened the poverty around the world. And so, yes, I'd have to say, depending on how that question was phrased, I'm not sure if the proper answer was yes or no, but yes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Supreme. We've got a question for Mr. Hornberger. Zachariah Williams says, question for Hornberger. What will you make your absolute principles known in practical terms? How would you deal with dismantling federal agencies? Would you outright abolish the FDA or restrain it to an advisory investigative capacity?
Well, you have to get congressional permission, obviously. I mean, we're a nation of laws, but I would make the case for abolition and then let Congress decide. But that's what we have to do as libertarians. We have to make the positive case for liberty. And this is one of my disagreements with Judge Gray. I mean, there he calls for an income tax. I mean, this is shocking to me that he's going to be the presidential nominee possibly and going out saying, I favor an income tax and a mandatory welfare program. That's what AOC stands for. That's what Andrew Yang stands for, this monthly welfare check. And he says this shows we're compassionate as a country. It shows nothing of the sort. It's stealing. It's using the IRS to steal money from people and give it to other people and under the false name of care and compassion. It's nothing of the sort, and it's not necessary. We can leave people free to keep everything they earn, and they decide what to do with it. And where charity is 100% voluntary. You don't need government to be doing these stealing and welfare programs. I also echo what Kokesh said about the national security state. We're talking about $1 trillion here. FBI, NSA, CIA, massive military industrial complex. I oppose this whole apparatus. Judge Gray approves of it, knowing that it's costing $1 trillion. I favor a limited government republic with a very basic military force. Adam's right. Our founding fathers would never have approved a national security state type of governmental system. We would have been still operating under the Articles of Confederation, which I think is worth pointing out. The federal government under the Articles for more than 10 years did not have any power to tax whatsoever.
All right, thank you, Mr. Hornberger. We are going to move on to a question for Judge Jim Gray. And Dan Valentine says, how would Judge Gray work to resolve the climate change crisis as president?
That's a very good question, and certainly on people's minds. The private sector does so much better job at addressing these climate problems. You know, again, on my podcast, I invited the Nature Conservancy, and they talked about all the good things they're doing. Government throws money at it. Government ends up with, these funds to fix supposedly polluted places. They run out of money. They get the people that were polluters off the hook. No, you bring in a civil justice system where the victims can sue the polluters. And then they probably get insurance. The polluter's going to have to be careful because their insurance companies will make sure that they don't get that exposure. The private system will work. The public system, it's oh, poor baby. Oh, go back to Milton Friedman, who said that we've got to judge our programs by their success, not their good intentions. That would be a positive revolution in our country because the government is woeful with regard to success on environmental issues. they overdo things, they let exceptions for their cronies. No, the civil justice system where victims can speak up. You polluted my well. You polluted the upper river that now is affecting me. It's a little harder with the air, but you can still do it. And certainly if you come in and dump things on my property, I will be able to bring charges against you. We will be able to do that. And again, the voluntary community. We have these trash heaps out in plastics in the Pacific Ocean, et cetera. You know, let's make it so that the private industry has some benefits in put a bounty on tons of plastic. If that's what's happening, the private sector will work. And by the way, let me say in my couple of seconds left, I think Mr. Hornberger complimented me rather severely by getting desperate and saying that I supported these $1 trillion thing. I don't do that at all. But Mr. Hornberger, we do need a military. It doesn't come from charity. We need some things in government, and so government's going to need some money. I'm going to cut it back enormously. That's my position.
All right, thank you. The next question is going to Joe Jorgensen. Daniel Frank says, what issue will most likely draw Republican, Democrat, and independent voters to choose your platform? How could you possibly win one state without the money or resources that these other parties have?
Wow, that's a lot of questions for 2 minutes. So first of all, I would say that probably I would emphasize different issues for different audiences, and politicians always do that. For the left, I would emphasize that we want to bring our troops home. We want America to be one giant Switzerland, armed and neutral. We want to save lives. We don't want to go over there and support foreign dictators. For the right, I would emphasize healthcare. Healthcare is a life or death situation. And the right side is absolutely correct in that we don't want a single payer system. However, the problem with the Republicans is they have just as many cronies, as many special interests as the left have. So they're not going to solve the problem anymore. And as far as not having money, we have to do that by having a message that is mainstream enough, not by softening our principles, but we have to present the message in a way that excites the American voters. You know, for far too long, libertarians have put out campaigns there that excite themselves. They talk about things that interest them. What we need to start doing is we need to start addressing topics that excite the voters. And one thing that I always point out is that in the 1970s type libertarian, we often gave the message of it's our money, we should be able to do what we want with it. Instead, we need to turn around and show how the libertarian platform is the most compassionate out there, that the free market can handle it better, not because it's our money and we want to keep it, but because the free market will serve them better. And we have to show them how the free market works better in all situations.
All right, thank you very much. And we're going to move on to a question for Dan Berman. Ivan Yer says, it doesn't matter if taxes are immoral or should be illegal, it's acceptable now. How are you going to transition into a new system?
Yeah, I think that's actually a really good question. And, you know, we have a lot of people who think that we absolutely need taxes to keep society moving. And we need to change that mentality. We absolutely need to change that mentality because a lot of people will even say now that the income tax is illegally collected. And I agree with that. But as long as most of society says, you know, well, this is acceptable because this is what we need, they're going to accept it. It doesn't matter if you show them that you don't have to pay it. People are going to think that they have to pay it. So we need to get off of that. And that's what the new American dream is all about. It's getting people back into property so they own property. It's getting people off of dependence on the social nets, getting people off of dependence in Social Security and all these welfare programs. Because when people are not dependent on that, they have so much more and they can realize that, hey, I don't need to work so hard. I don't need 2 jobs. One adult can go to work while the other parent stays home and teaches the kids and homeschools. There's so many options that become available and we have so much money. So it's not a question of, well, who's going to pay for the schools, because it's, you know, you're going to have so many options. Oh, we can just pay cash and just pick the best school that we like. That's, you know, the closest, the best, whatever you want. you get that choice back. And once people start to understand that, then you can start saying, well, why am I paying all this money in taxes if I'm going to pay for the better school anyway, which is already more affordable? So we do need to fundamentally change the mindset of what taxes are about in order to get there. And that's something that we are working on very hard, and we're making a lot of progress with it.
All right, awesome. The next question is going to be for Mr. Vermin Supreme. It's from Nathan Kinman. And he says, Mr. Supreme, you once said that you were running on the LP platform because that's what the LP candidate should do if he's running as a libertarian. However, why is it that you agree with the LP platform, and how would you apply it as president?
Well, once again, yes, as a candidate for the Libertarian Party nomination, I have thoroughly agreed 100% to attempt to present the LP platform to the public as my own and as a reasonable platform. It is a platform that I came to after a long time of circling towards it, and eventually understood and realized that most of my core beliefs dovetailed very nicely with the Libertarian Party platform. And how would I certainly put that into practice as president? I think I've certainly alluded to it tonight in the aspects of the criminal justice system, certainly freeing all nonviolent offenders who have not committed no victim crimes. Of course, pulling back the military, ending the wars, weaning people off of the government, ending corporate structures, and of course, ultimately, as I have always believed, that in order to wean ourselves off of the government, we do indeed have to build up our alternate structures, and I would certainly encourage that through mutual aid, voluntarism, and charitable acts. And I believe that it's, of course, it would be a massive, massive transition. And I believe it does take one step at a time. And I believe that we can do it through conscious means.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Supreme. Our last question of this round is going to go to Adam Kokesh. Nicholas Quello says, with information more widely available than ever before, what sources do you use and trust to inform your views on current events?
That's a great question. And I have two primary sources, one for a mainstream view on the news, and that's Drudge Report, and one for an alternative view, and that's freedomsphoenix.com, both great news aggregator websites. But I also rely on my network and social media and the support of people around me to make sure that I'm not missing anything. And what we do with Adam versus the Man 5 days a week is encourage people to question me on the show and to see if I'm missing things. And speaking of missing things, I want to say that none of the candidates in this debate, as we're getting to the end, have come out with a strong message about how they're going to end the Fed, this criminal monetary system, or a strong anti-war message, or even rebutted the idea that they're all going to be some kind of central planner. And I gotta say, I love hearing my friends Judge Gray and Mr. Hornberger go back and forth. It's kind of like hearing Republicans and Democrats argue about who has the best central plan for the whole country, except that they don't compliment me on my principles as much as my friends Mr. Gray and Mr. Hornberger. And Jacob said at one point, there's a little slip of the tongue, I think he is going to be the nominee about Mr. Gray. I wonder if there's some behind the scenes manipulation collaboration going on here. But the thing is, we can't be playing their game. We can't be accepting their framework of central planning, of keeping the thing going. And my message has the proof behind it that this is what works, talking about issues that appeal to people outside of the movement. And I don't think any of these other candidates saying, I'm going to do this as the nominee, I'm going to do this, have any proof to back it up. I have the proof, having raised more money than everybody else, having the success as an activist over the course of my career, having the social media following, the coalition groups in our campaign. It shows that this is what works. So whether I'm the nominee or not, I would just point out these important issues to all my fellow candidates who are here for beautiful reasons. Let's look at what actually works.